The hardest ghosts are the ones that still breathe. You wake at strange hours, as if her name calls you in silence. The room feels wrong, like it carries a season from a life that ended months ago. You open your phone like it's sacred, scrolling through pictures and words not meant for you, trying to find meaning in scattered pixels. You fear what you might see, yet fear nothingness even more, because emptiness never argues. It just stares back. In the dark, you bargain with memory like a gambler already beaten, replaying moments until they shine too smooth, rewriting endings where you were enough to stay for. Morning comes, and you swear it's over, but when her name drops into conversation, it lands heavy on your chest and shifts the whole day. You go out, swipe, smile, meet new faces, but each one slips into the outline she left behind and cannot fill it. This would be a simple sadness if it belonged to a person who truly existed the way you remember. But your devotion is not to her. Your longing is bound to a statue you carved and then mistook for a living woman. The mind is not a camera. It is a painter with a limited palette, and when it is starving, it eats its own colors. You saw flashes of kindness and framed them as essence, mistook potential for reality, elevated moments into a mythology, and then became a devoted keeper of that altar. When she left, you did not only lose a person, you lost a future you had already moved into, a luminous apartment in the sky that existed only in the architecture of hope. The heartbreak you name as love is grief for a story, grief for the character you imagined and the role she was unwilling to play. This is why your chest tightens when her name appears on a screen. Not because she is your missing half, but because she borrowed the shape of your disowned powers and wore them convincingly. She was free where you were controlled, bold where you were accommodating, demanding where you were apologetic, and your unconscious recognized its own exiled brilliance parading in front of you. You did not fall for wildness. You fell for the permission slip it promised. You did not chase confidence. You chased the echo of your own voice returning from a mouth that wasn't yours. You believed proximity would grant you access to what you refused to awaken within. This is why letting go feels like dismemberment. The fantasy was not only a person, it was an escape hatch into a different version of you. Release looks like losing her, but the deeper fear is losing the possibility of becoming that more daring self without borrowing her skin. Call the attachment what it is: dependency masquerading as devotion. Real love expands your world while leaving your center intact. Dependency replaces your center with a weather vane. Your worth rises and falls with the wind of another person's attention. Your days are scheduled by the ping of messages. Your sense of future is pledged as collateral to a banker who never promised a loan. You have outsourced your stability to someone who demonstrated poor stewardship. And because the body is a loyal student, it learned to equate love with volatility. It memorized the chemistry: a hit of attention, a spike of hope, a crash of silence, the frantic hunt for resolution. That cocktail becomes familiar, then necessary, then sacred. You begin to confuse the tremor of anxiety with the beat of a heart in love. And within that confusion, a prison is constructed without bricks. You see the bars only when you try to walk away. You have tried willpower. It fails because you are wrestling not opinions, but reflexes. The nervous system does not negotiate with intellectual arguments. It follows rituals. When mornings begin with a search for signals from her, the ritual says she is the sun. When evenings close with imagined dialogues, the ritual says she is the court of final appeal. Habits are prayers said by the hands. Break the prayer and the god loses power. Until then, you are not choosing. You are being run. If you study your history without defensiveness, a pattern steps forward like a witness. Different names, same choreography. Each new relationship has an uncanny familiarity, as if the stage was rebuilt from the same blueprints while the cast changes costumes. This is no accident. The psyche is a relentless scientist repeating experiments in the hope of a different result. It reconstructs the conditions of old wounds and says, perhaps this time the cut will close cleanly. But you enter with unchanged consciousness and leave with the same bleed. The first authors of the script were not lovers. They were early caretakers, family dynamics, the original economy of attention in which you learned how much of yourself had to be offered for a coin of warmth. Chaos was home, and so chaos returned wearing perfume. Here lies the function of your anxiety around her. It is not mere noise. It is an alarm against self-abandonment. When you live near your own center, People who thrive on turbulence feel like a foreign climate. When you live outside yourself, turbulence feels like weather you were built for. The obsession over her words is a refuge from the question you avoid. Who are you when no one is watching? The analysis of her mixed signals keeps you from translating your own. You call it love because that name is noble. But under the costume lives avoidance. She became the distraction that spared you the terrifying intimacy of meeting yourself. There is a stern mercy in heartbreak. It is an excavation. The person who wounded you also opened a sight within you, and what is uncovered are not her secrets but yours. Where your boundaries were ornamental, where you broke contracts with yourself, where you traded respect for a seat at the table. Each betrayal was an exam you wrote for yourself and then failed to grade. Each broken promise from her mirrored one you quietly broke with your own soul. This does not mean you should be grateful for cruelty. It means the rubble is legible if you refuse to look away. Suffering becomes data when you stop romanticizing it. It speaks in the grammar of patterns, and patterns are maps. So the task is not to erase feeling, but to change allegiance. The qualities you chased were never meant to be purchased from another. They were calling to be repatriated. What looked like wild freedom in her was an unclaimed frontier in you. What dazzled you as unapologetic confidence was a self-respect you had hidden under diplomacy. Integration is not imitation. You do not become her. You retrieve yourself. Ask sober questions. If independence was magnetic, where have you scripted your value around being needed? If passion electrified you, where did you ration your aliveness to stay acceptable? If mystery intoxicated you, where did you become perfectly legible to avoid rejection? The goal is not to build a mask that resembles hers. It is to remove the masks that have made you unintelligible to yourself. This return to authenticity will look like danger at first, because it threatens economies built on your compliance. Some friendships were anchored to your willingness to shrink, to apologize for breathing too expansively, to be available on demand. Let them loosen. What will replace them cannot arrive if your calendar is overbooked with versions of you that never wanted to exist. The reward for living without disguise is not applause from everyone. It is self-trust. Self-trust is the luxury that ends compulsive bargain hunting for cheap validation. Understanding is a scaffold, but you must climb. Begin with boundaries that are not theatrical, but logistical. Remove her number, not as a grand gesture, but as a practical way to interrupt the ritual. Unfollow, mute, step aside, not to punish, but to let your nervous system relearn silence that isn't dread. Avoid the old haunts for a while. A wound does not close if you keep poking it to test whether it still hurts. Then refill the reclaimed time with practices that reintroduce you to the person you have deferred. Writing that refuses performance, movement that reminds the body it belongs to you, solitude that does not collapse into scrolling through someone else's life. Let emotions do what they were designed for. Pass through. Feel anger without composing a memorandum for her moral education. Anger is your boundary rising to correct a lie. Feel grief without begging for an audience. Grief is love trying to return to its rightful owner. Practice joy that requires no witness. Joy is proof that your aliveness does not depend on surveillance. In the space created by these disciplines, set standards that are not poems. Respect is not a perk. Consistency is not a bonus. Reciprocity is not a luxury. They are minimum requirements for admission to your interior life. You do not negotiate with people about whether you deserve clarity. You decide. Learn the difference between love and attachment the way one learns the difference between music and noise. By paying attention without hope of a particular song, love has room for reality. It allows what is, even when what is does not flatter our desires. It does not demand possession as a guarantee against fear. Attachment is appetite disguised as devotion. It needs the other person to be a custom-made answer to old questions. And when reality refuses, it throws tantrums and writes sonnets about fate. Much of what you called love was a refusal to let the world be as it is. When you surrender that refusal, you do not become indifferent. You become capable of a love that survives the truth. Let your heartbreak testify on your behalf. It proves the depth of your capacity. The problem was never that you felt too much. It was that you invested where dividends could not be paid. Do not solve that mistake by going numb. Choose better recipients. Reclaim the energy you spent feeding a void and build a life thick with your own meanings. Become someone whose respect you crave to keep, not someone who hustles for entry into indifferent arms. Give yourself the steady tenderness you kept outsourcing to unpredictable weather. Then require from others nothing more dramatic than integrity. Abandon the old template in which you do the reaching, the initiating, the interpreting, the emotional heavy lifting, while someone else enjoys the benefit. Healthy bonds do not make you guess, they convey themselves. You will know you are near one when conversation relieves rather than depletes, when honesty is not an event but an atmosphere, when your days expand because you do not spend your hours defending your right to feel. In such spaces, you do not vanish to keep the peace. You become more legible, more dimensional, and somehow both freer and more committed. The right person will not require your perfection to justify their tenderness. They will not penalize your humanity with withdrawal. They will not teach you the habit of bracing. They will stand where they say they will stand, and you will stop rehearsing speeches in your head. The ultimate release is not merely her. It is the version of you that auditioned for love by erasing himself. That figure has performed long enough. He earned applause from audiences that were never going to offer sanctuary. Retire him with honors and take your life back. What enters in the vacancy is a quieter, heavier dignity. Love begins to resemble home, not because someone else makes you feel safe, but because you have stopped renting out your foundations to keep company.